was made for tonight. Daughters and sisters, mothers and wives, every woman in every walk of life. No ceiling can stop us. We're not here to ask. It's time. We're here to shatter that glass. We made a resolution to amend the Constitution and ratify the ERA. Women across the Commonwealth and country are demanding our equality without an apology.
My daughter in this picture that was taken 44 years ago, and we were on the mall in Washington, D.C. for the Equal Rights Amendment. 44 years is a long time to wait.
For these 24 words to be the law of the land for every woman and girl. We've come a long way. And I don't know about you, but I think that it's right on time for Virginia to finally be on the right side of history. It's not too late. Together we will find a way. Oh, yeah.
We live in a first-class country, Madam Speaker, but so many women are treated like second-class citizens. There are so many women, including those in this room, who paved the way for women like me. And none, Madam Speaker, none of this would have been possible without the incredible fighters for equality.
ERA, ERA, ratify the ERA, 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 ratify the ERA.
Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or infringed by the United States or by any state on account of sex.
Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or infringed by the United States or by any state on account of sex.
It is time to guarantee true gender equality under the United States Constitution. It's time to change our standard of equal to truly mean equal, regardless of sex.
And I want to be unequivocally clear that there is only one way to spell equality, and that is simply E-R-A. Thank you.
All those in favor of the resolution passed, opposed 5. Ayes 59, nays 41, abstention 0. For the women of Virginia and the women of America, the resolution is finally passed.
Woo!
Wow.
All right, Robin, I'm going to just jump right in.
Go ahead.
All right, so hello, I'm Catherine White, Program Director at the Women's Summit over here, and it's so great to be in the room with so many of you equality warriors from Virginia and looking in the chat all over the country. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to have you in the Zoom, and you've been fighting for equality, many of you, most of your lives. So look, we would love to hear from you in the chat to give us a nugget of that story, your battle story, how you earned your stripes, or anything just really great about what you've been doing for equality and what we're going to do going forward to get it enshrined into the U.S. Constitution, right? So let's get it started. Welcome to day 8. Unbelievable. We had 10 days. We're on day 8. Only 2 more to go. And it's the letter N. So you can see the N. It's for each letter in the experience, and we're almost at the end of that experience. And tonight's session is called Let's Talk ERA, What's Next? And truthfully, this has been on the agenda for 9 decades, 9 9 long years. So to get that equality under the law. And tonight's moderators are some badass champions of equality who are the founders of the newly formed Virginia chapter of the National Women's Political Caucus. Eileen Davis is in the house, Andrea Miller, and Kati Hornung. Welcome to all of you. So it's my pleasure to hand that mic over to Eileen, and I can tell you it's going to be a lot of good talking tonight. And we're all familiar with Eileen's reputation. She even said she didn't have to put maybe her name up because everybody knows who she is, and that's damn straight. And I'm surprised if I gave her her way to name tonight's session, it would have been get the hell out of our way. Here comes the ERA. So with that said, Eileen, take it away, and thank you for all of you on the panel. We're excited.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to What's Next with the Equal Rights Amendment and our movement moving forward. I am Eileen Davis, and I will be the moderator for tonight's webinar. What's next in achieving legal publication of the Equal Rights Amendment as part of the Constitution in the wake of the Trump administration's injunction and the lawsuit, their injunction of our lawsuit, and what do we advocates want to know to be more effective as we move forward to advocate for the final publication of the Equal Rights Amendment? We have 3 prongs in tonight's webinar. First up, we're going to be joined by Virginia's Attorney General Mark Herring and Deputy Solicitor General Michelle Kallen, who will give an overview on the pending court cases, which is Virginia v. Fierro, Fierro being the archivist in the United States. And this case was filed right after Virginia ratified. So, and Michelle and Attorney General will talk to you about that tonight. And they're going to answer our questions about how we can be more informed advocates moving forward to, get this done. Okay, our second section is going to be our next step strategy, which is going to be presented by Kati Hornung. Kati Hornung was our Virginia VA Ratify ERA campaign coordinator, and I'm sure you all know her as well. And she's going to talk about how do we harness the formidable coalition we built here in Virginia, and how do we take our winning Virginia formula for flipping seats nationally? Kati will present in detail our answer, which is the rollout of our newly formed voteequality.us, which was born out of the groundwork laid by VA Ratify ERA. We're taking it on the road, basically. Last up will be Andrea Miller. Andrea, who also needs no introduction, is the interim president of our newly formed Virginia chapter of the National Women's Political Caucus. Andrea is going to detail this next level advocacy and how through National Women's Political Caucus Virginia chapter, and for some reason there never was a Virginia chapter before, how we can collaboratively amplify our strength, our advocacy here in Virginia and nationally. So let's get started. In our first of 3 presentations, it is my extreme pleasure to welcome Virginia's Attorney General Mark Herring and the smartest young woman I've ever met, who I think reminds me of Ruth Bader Ginsburg 50 years ago. She's smart as a whip. I call her Baby Ruth. I hope that doesn't embarrass her, because she reminds me of another Ruth. And they are going to discuss the lawsuit filed right after Virginia ratified. There will be a question and answer period following each presentation. Please note you can drop your questions in the Q&A kiosk on the bottom of the screen. So please, let's give a big Zoom welcome to our Attorney General Mark Herring and Deputy Solicitor General Michelle Kallen.
Thank you, Eileen. It's great to see you, and it's fantastic to be back at the Women's Summit again. And so thank you to Network Nova for putting this together. And I also want to say, I know Kati is on, and to everyone at VA Ratify ERA, thanks for your advocacy. I was so proud, like all of us, that Virginia put us over the top. And I've been an ERA supporter since I was a teenager. I was raised by a single mom, and I had an older sister. And so I learned to be a feminist at a very young age. And passing the ERA and making it a part of the Constitution has been a priority for my administration from my very first day. And I also want to say it was what a wonderful moment it was. And I'm sure some of you who were there when this passed, with Speaker Fillercorn being the first woman to be Speaker of the House in Virginia history, leading the way. It was just fantastic to see this happen. And as you mentioned, Eileen, we filed suit right away when it became clear that the Trump administration was going to interfere and tell the archivist not to certify it because Virginia was the 38th state to ratify. That's what was necessary. That's what the Constitution requires. And it is now a part of the Constitution. But the Trump administration is trying to get a court to say otherwise, and we are not having any of it. And so I knew that the forces of who've been fighting women's equality for so long probably were not just going to give up. And so well ahead of the session, I started organizing a legal team, and I put my very best lawyers on it. And I think those of you who were present for some of the committee meetings when the resolution was being considered in committee will agree. I asked Michelle Kallen to lead that team, and those of you who saw her in action in the committee rooms can understand why she is the perfect person to lead this. There were some legislators who thought they had some smart questions that were going to stump her, and she just ran circles around them, and she was fantastic. As you said, we filed suit immediately when it became clear the Trump administration was going to interfere with this. Their view is, it's been 231 years, and he's telling the women of America, you're going to have to keep waiting for women's equality to be guaranteed in the Constitution, and that is shameful. But as I said, we're not having any of it. We've got a great case. We've got a great legal team. We also teamed up with some of my colleagues, other attorneys general from Nevada and Illinois. Aaron Ford is the AG in Nevada, and Kwame Raoul is the Attorney General in Illinois. They've joined Virginia in this case. They were the 36th and 37th ratifying states. And so I think we've got a great case. We've got a great team. And Michelle, why don't you take it from here and maybe talk a little bit about the gist of the case and where we are in the process.
Sure. So it's been probably the most rewarding thing in my career so far to be working on this case. We filed pretty soon after the Virginia ratified, and right now we're just going through the initial briefing in the case. So the Department of Justice, the Trump administration moved to dismiss the case, and tomorrow we're filing our brief opposing that motion to dismiss. Since then, there have been 5 states who are opposed to the ERA who intervened in the case, and they're looking to raise some of the same points of the Trump administration and say that rescissions so 3 of those 5 states purported to rescind. They're saying that their votes should count, and we're excited to argue against them because we think they're wrong, and we're doing everything in our power to get courts to recognize that the ERA is now part of the Constitution. Eileen, I think you're still muted.
Okay, here we go. Fantastic. Okay, we're gonna take some questions. And our first question is from Laura Callow. Laura Callow, 92-year-old Laura Callow of Michigan, never gave up. Virginia's Florence Crater, many of the people on this call remember Florence Crater. She was an activist in the 70s and the 80s that fought very, very hard for the Equal Rights Amendment. Florence Crater and Kentucky's Dr. Allie Hickson, at a meeting at the Belmont House, the Alice Paul House in DC, wanted to discuss how the newly ratified Madison Amendment would change the calculus for the Equal Rights Amendment. First proposed by James Madison 203 years earlier, and finally ratified on May 7th, my birthday, 1993, they had to ask the question, if the Madison Amendment could ratify after 203 years, how could they be told that the ERA was no longer contemporaneous? Florence Crater said she brought that question back to Richmond and back to the University of Richmond and found 3 law students to research this question, writing the legal brief, Why the Equal Rights Amendment is Still Legally Viable and Presentable Before the States. It was published by the University of Richmond Law School and the William & Mary Law School. And I know, Attorney General, you're a Richmond Law graduate, so you may not have known this fun fact. But anyway, then the review went national quickly. And the fight to restart the ERA was on. And then via the three-state strategy, out of that brief and out of what they decided to do next was the three-state strategy to complete the 3 remaining states. The link to this brief will be coming in the email you're going to get after this event for you to read it. Okay, advocates, I present to you Laura Callow from Michigan.
Well, thank you, Eileen. I feel privileged to have lived long enough to see the 38th state ratified, and I was in the room when Flora Crater suggested that we seek a legal opinion on the 3-state strategy and agreed to contact the dean of the law school at Richmond. And I also want to thank Cheryl Herndon, along with her Allison Held and Daniel Steger for their legal brief, because it gave us permission to pursue the 3-state strategy, and we wouldn't be here today without it. And I'm also want to thank Attorney General Mark Herndon for his work on getting us over this last hurdle, and to all of you who planned this Women's Summit, and everyone who's been involved. Thank you, whatever your role for this. And so for Mr. Herring, my question is, recently, 2 Supreme Court justices, Roberts and Gorsuch, have made surprising decisions. In your brief, are you trying to appeal to the various personalities and judicial philosophies of the court, especially the conservatives?
Laura, thank you for the question. It's good to see you coming in all the way from Michigan. And you know, what I'm hopeful is that all 9 justices just keep an open mind, because I am convinced that our legal arguments are right. And the Constitution in Article 5 lays out the process for amending the Constitution. And our framers were very thoughtful about trying to balance the roles between the federal power and the states. And so the Constitution gave Congress 2 roles, 2 jobs. One, to decide whether to put an amendment for consideration to the states. And second, whether the states should use the method of ratification by state legislatures or state conventions. That's it. And then it's up to the states to decide whether to ratify and when to ratify. And so if you just look at the language of the Constitution, all that is required is that 38 states ratify, which Virginia has put us over the top, and it becomes a part of the Constitution. And in your opening, you talked about the Madison Amendment and how it was ratified over 200 years after it was proposed. After Virginia ratified it, it became a part of the Constitution more than 200 years later. And you know, that's one of the arguments the opponents try to throw up, is that Congress purported to put a deadline in their resolution, but the Constitution doesn't say that Congress can do that, and it allows the states to decide whether and when to ratify the Constitution. And so the fact that the 27th Amendment took so long just blows that argument right out of the water. And Michelle, you want to maybe add in about why it really undermines the one court case that's out there, the Dillon versus Gloss case, where it said Congress could put a deadline in it?
Yeah, so Dillon v. Gloss addressed a question of whether there has to be contemporaneous ratification by the states alongside the timing of Congress. And the 27th Amendment clearly shows that that's no longer the case, because if either Dillon is correct or the 27th Amendment is not part of the Constitution, and we all know that it is. So that part of the decision is no longer good law. I think part of the main question in the case is whether or not a deadline in the preamble is binding on the states. And our legal theory is that it makes a big difference for a deadline to be in the preamble, which is part of the proposed amendment that the states don't vote on, versus in the body of the amendment itself, which is what was done in the past in a number of other amendments. Now, if it's in the body of the deadline itself and states vote on it, it still becomes part of the Constitution, but if the deadline then is binding, it's kind of a part of the Constitution that by its own language is subject to the deadline and is inoperative. Kind of like with the 18th Amendment. It's still in the Constitution. The 20th Amendment rescinded it, but it's not a part of the Constitution that's operative. So to us, the difference in the deadline being external to the part where the states vote on, which is the case with the ERA, versus internal to the amendment itself, makes a difference. And that's consistent with Article 5's plain language, which says that an amendment shall be valid when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states. And the ERA became valid when it was ratified by Virginia, the 38th state.
Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Well, if you need any further proof that the universe is on our side, our next question comes from Cheryl Herndon, one of the 3 authors of that law review article we discussed, Why the Equal Rights Amendment is Legally Viable and Presentable Before the States. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Cheryl Herndon. Hi, Cheryl.
Thank you, Eileen. So I am really excited to be a part of this. I had been, I'm ashamed to say, essentially on hiatus from the Equal Rights Amendment since 1995 until Eileen Davis basically literally tackled me and dragged me back into the battle. So thank you, Eileen. Michelle, I think my question is mostly for you and for Attorney General Herring. When I see essentially 2 issues in this battle, one being the validity of deadlines, and 2 being whether or not rescissions are appropriate. But my question is with regards to the deadlines. So first, and no matter which way I go with my questions, because there's a series of them, I come back to the point that the Equal Rights Amendment does become part of the Constitution. So I'm hoping you don't find a flaw in my argument. So first, I think we start with what you said, Michelle. Does Article 5 actually allow Congress to impose deadlines in proposed amendments? And if it doesn't, well, now we have 38 states that have ratified, and the Equal Rights Amendment is part of the Constitution. If Congress can impose deadlines, then we get to the point, is a deadline in the proposing clause the same as a deadline in the text? If it isn't, because the ERA deadline is in the proposing clause, then the Equal Rights Amendment is now part of the Constitution. If the deadlines are treated differently, and so Congress can put a deadline in a proposing clause, and if that deadline is in fact controlling, well, then surely Congress would also have the authority to remove a deadline. And so if the deadline in the proposing clause is controlling, so that the Equal Rights Amendment is not now part of the Constitution, if as a result of the November election, there's a favorable House and Senate, and there's a vote to remove the deadline, what am I missing? Don't we then have the Equal Rights Amendment as a valid part of the Constitution?
I think that all is correct, with one place where so our view is that both Congress can propose deadlines, but if it wants it to be operative, it has to be in the text of the amendment itself, which for the ERA it's not. But even the deadlines outside of the language that's ratified by the states, certainly Congress can remove that deadline too. And so I think that should remove any doubt. If Congress does end up removing it, then any of these questions should stop. They probably won't, but they should. But even without Congress removing the deadline in the joint resolution, without it being in the language that the states themselves ratify, it's not operative, because Article 5 does not say that Congress can set some sort of external deadline that doesn't give states an equal role in the process. And if Congress wants to set a deadline, it must do so in a way that gives states an equal role, and that's by doing it in the amendment itself that then the states vote to ratify.
Thank you.
And
Wow.
just to add Michelle, and to follow along, the presidential election could have an important impact as well, because the whole idea of the Trump administration getting in the middle of this and having the DOJ come in and try to thwart the will of 38 states is unprecedented. The Constitution gives the executive branch no role whatsoever in the amendment process. So perhaps with a successful outcome in November, a Biden Department of Justice might return to the traditional view of the Constitution, and we might have a different trajectory for the case.
Wow, that was a master class. That was just fantastic. And I'm sorry to say, we've actually run over our time. That was a lot of information, and it was fantastic. We'll circle back, but now we have to go to our next session, because our next session is a natural extension of what we're talking about, of taking our advocacy for the Equal Rights Amendment and the groundwork and the ground game that we've built and taking it to the next level. So next up is Kati Hornung. Kati Hornung is going to discuss our next step strategy about taking it nationally. The natural progression of VA ratify ERA. After much work and planning, we are going to talk to you tonight about the rollout of voteequality.us. I give you Kati Hornung. She was our campaign manager for VA ratify ERA. And if you know Kati, you know she always brings her A game. Kati, take it away.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. This is really exciting and fun to see a lot of people and a lot of names that I guess with coronavirus, I just haven't been seeing as many people lately. So it's fun to see everybody. It's great to get the update on the kind of the judicial branch strategy for making sure that the Equal Rights Amendment is printed into the Constitution. Tomorrow, a lot of groups, including I saw a shout out for Gen Ratify, and also I know a lot of groups around the nation, whether they're national groups or some of the state groups, we're all going to be also filing briefs tomorrow. So we're all looking forward to that moment getting behind us. But from an advocacy perspective, with that judicial branch strategy in such good hands, all the lawyers are doing all the lawyerly things, and we have 3 wonderful AG offices around the country working together, coordinated on a great case. That is one strategy, and it's in good hands. We as advocates, what's our job now? So we took a look at it after we finished here in Virginia, and we really feel like, and I will go here to share screen in a split second here. We really feel like the Virginia story was a bit of a foreshadowing for where we were. Oh, I can't do that. I can't share screen. Robin, if you have a chance and have my slides, that would be awesome. Otherwise, no worries. I'll just keep rolling. So we felt like in Virginia, we were the foreshadowing for what's going to happen nationally. And we are that foreshadowing for a couple different reasons. We're the foreshadowing on what's going to happen, as well as the foreshadowing on what's the right strategy to get us to the next step. And let's see, next slide, please. So here in Virginia, as this is the quick recap, we got it through one chamber multiple times, could not get it through the other chamber, even though it had widespread support, just like it does all around the country. And lobbying and outreach was not enough to stop the obstruction here in Virginia. This is the exact same setup that's going to happen nationally, or it is happening right now. The House has passed a resolution to change the deadline, or to remove the deadline, and the Senate just won't even give it a hearing in the committee. And so we are kind of stuck in that same treadmill where we were stuck here in Virginia. And so the answer, next slide, is that we need to be looking at a change in leadership in the Senate to be an equality leadership. I say this in a nonpartisan way. We tend to have 501c3 funding. We are not here saying we have to flip seats to all Democrats, et cetera. But the reality is we have to have equality champions in seats. We have to have an equality-oriented leadership in charge of the Senate for this to move to the next level. Personally, I would like to see the Supreme Court clarify Article 5 shall means shall, and that should be enough. I'd love to see it happen that way. Realistically, I hear from my lawyer friends that they like to not have to make official things if they can kind of punt or push off. And so if the Congress would remove the deadline, they might be just happy to say, yep, it's a done deal because Congress has authority according to Article 5 and now we're done. And so our job as advocates is to make sure that we get an equality leadership. Now, these 8 states for the 28th were picked before March 1st when the entire world went upside down. And so we are swapping out Mississippi and adding in Kansas. Our goal here is to have the list of the 8 closest races that have essentially an equality advocate against an equality non-advocate. And so that's kind of what this slide is set up to be. We are taking what worked here in Virginia and we're going to take it nationally. These are 8 state strategies, and we're going to be doing things like an ice cream for equality tour 2.0. I see that one of our drivers is on, and I'm hoping that's not giving her any PTSD. I know that it sometimes gives Dana PTSD to see ice cream at Costco, but we are going to be taking that around. We're hoping to get the funding to do 3 different vans on different, so that one van's going to hit 3 states and the other one's going to hit 2, and then another one will hit 3. So we're hopeful to take that message right to the youth and the really the college campuses. If the college campuses are not in session, we know that everybody has to get groceries no matter what, so we will just stake out grocery stores if we have to. As we did here in Virginia, this campaign is just 100% all game in and all the time, and we will stop at nothing. So not even an international pandemic is going to slow any of this. So the goal is, as well as taking it to people in a very tangible way with giveaways and spreading the message and making sure people are registered to vote, making sure they know when the vote is, making sure they know who the equality advocates are. Our other job is also going to be on the virtual campaigns, and that we will be hopefully working out a media strategy as well. The voteequality.us, we're currently in a phase where we are just kind of looking through our messaging, making sure that we are tightening everything up and that we're getting ready not only for kind of the lobbying and the coalition building that needs to happen, but also for the on-the-ground game. You'll notice on these 8 states, a number of these are unratified states, so there are women working in these states very hard already, pushing that discussion of ERA and ratification in those states. So that kind of ties us in automatically with people on the ground. So that should be a load of fun. There are a lot of Senate races, and you can go to the next slide and then we'll be done with this. These are all the other Senate races. So as you can see, loads and loads of states have Senate races. If the election was, say the end of next week, it's actually looking pretty good for the equality advocates in the room. It's looking like these Senate races that the people who support equality would be retaining seats, as well as new equality supporters, enough to get a shift to an equality-oriented leadership. So our job is just to keep working, take nothing for granted, 100% all the time, every day, no matter what. So as you know, I mean, anybody who watched the VA Ratify ERA campaign, a lot of people put in a ton of work, and it's exhausting work, but it is self-fulfilling work, because every single American should be seeing themselves in that Constitution, and it really can't, we can't ever have any level of discrimination that is somehow protected in our Constitution. And that's kind of how I see what's going on right now. So, and that's fine with the screen share. If we can go back so that we can check out Q&A and chats. I don't have a ton of, I know that we ran a little bit over, so maybe I'll kind of try to answer a couple of questions kind of quickly. If anybody has any questions related to voteequality.us, and if not, I can cede time and we can move on to Andrea Miller.
Any quick questions, people? Drop it in the Q&A. All right. And you covered it all, Katie. Thank you so much. My goodness. You know, Katie, you did this. We did this. We really made it happen, and we're going to make it happen again on a national scale. All right. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I'm so proud of every person on this call. We built it. Thank you, Katie. All right. Lastly, the National Women's Political Caucus was formed 45 plus years ago by Shirley Chisholm, Bella Abzug, Fannie Lou Hammer, Gloria Steinem, and Betty Friedan. We often say we stand on the shoulders of giants, and with the establishment of the Virginia chapter of the National Women's Political Caucus, we really, really do. Andrea will tell us about this historic, exciting opportunity and how you and your team and your advocates and your circle can be part of it. A Zoom welcome to our Andrea Miller, who herself is a force of nature. Andrea, take it away.
Thank you so much, Eileen. Thank you, Stair, and the entire Women's Summit. When we look at the work that the women and people of Virginia did on the Equal Rights Amendment, not only did we ratify the Equal Rights Amendment in Virginia, we were the force that provided the strategy for Nevada and Illinois to beat back all of the historic nonsense that people had thrown at the Equal Rights Amendment, saying, oh, if you ratify this, the boogeyman will come and horrible things will happen. In Virginia, we honed our arguments and we delivered our arguments to our sisters and brothers in Nevada and Illinois. And when they were successful, we knew we had to be successful. So we tried for the 2019 legislative session. We had the strategy, we had the votes, and again, we were stymied. And as Katie said, we realized we are going to need to replace the butts in the seat. So we went about doing that, and in November 2019, that is exactly what happened. We replaced senators and we replaced House members, and then we were able to immediately ratify the Equal Rights Amendment in Virginia. And we then went to Congress and said, okay, we brought you the 38 states. We've shown you that we are very, very serious. Now, Congress, we may not really need you to do it, but what the hey? Let's have worked through every possible strategy. Let's blow this deadline. So we have that historic vote in the House of Representatives, and then as Katie said, it stalled in the US Senate. So when I was looking at all the work we had done and in talking to Katie, we realized we wanted to have a new old organization in Virginia. We wanted to have an organization that would be smart, that would be strategic, that knew how to work hard, that had imagination, and that would be willing to not only get the job done the way we had in Virginia, but to be able to lend our experience and our expertise to other states, to keep working in Virginia. And because of our proximity to Washington, D.C., and the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, to be able to continue our advocacy work. But when we ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, and when that amendment is part of the Constitution, our work is not finished. We now have infrastructure and a framework, and on that we will hang all the other legislation that we need to lift up, raise up, protect, and empower women and families in Virginia and ultimately in the country. What I want to do right now is I want to read a part of the mission statement of the National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia to increase women's participation in the political process. We got really, really good at that. To increase the number of feminists in elected and appointed positions. Those numbers are just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. To support candidates who will prioritize women's issues or family issues or economic issues, and who will employ women in decision-making roles in their campaigns and office staffs. We are not backing down, we are only moving forward. To work for the repeal of discriminatory laws, especially laws which discriminate based on gender. We get it. Equality is equality, and we need laws across all spectrums that support equality for everybody. To draft and support legislation that complies with the principles of human equality and that concerns the needs of women. In pursuit of these goals, National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia is dedicated to eradicating bias, both explicit and implicit in all its forms, including but not limited to sexism, racism, anti-Semitism, ageism, violence, socioeconomic status, ableism, sexual orientation, gender identification, political ideology, national origin, ethnicity, and discrimination on the basis of religion. Furthermore, National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia is dedicated to ensuring reproductive freedom. Now, if these goals and these ideals are something that you can support, I urge women everywhere, all ages, races, sexes, gender, identity, whatever it is, to be prepared to step forward. Because I, as the interim and founding president and our entire team, we are prepared. We have already stepped up, but we are stepping back to allow new leadership in a new organization for women and families in Virginia to pick up where we left off and to take Virginia firmly into the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. As Alice Paul said, unless women are prepared to be involved politically, they should be prepared to be ignored politically. And as Frederick Douglass said, power never concedes power without a fight. It never has, it never will. So, you know, we've accomplished so much. There's so much left to do. So what can you do? What can you do? You can be an informed advocate, raise public awareness, and keep the struggle to finish constitutional equality in the public discourse and in the press. Remember, judges watch the news and they read the newspapers too. We have two courts here, the court and the court of public opinion. We as advocates, it's our job to keep the court of public opinion telling what we want to make sure it gets out there. Number two, Vote Equality US is an issue-based GOTV initiative that we know works. And the stronger the numbers, the better it works. Join us and please get involved. Strength in numbers. And join the National Women's Political Caucus. We often say that our fight has always been a long-term strategy. And when we consider the National Women's Political Caucus's history and legacy and what it means to take it forward, well, it's an amazing opportunity to be part of such a legacy as we move to the next chapter of what Abraham Lincoln called right makes might. We have a few minutes left for any questions that are still out there. Let's check and see if we have any questions. And okay. Do we have any particular work for the next session coming up in Virginia? Ladies, who wants to take that question? Ladies, hello? Why am I dark? What's going on? What happened?
Can you say that one again? Sorry.
We have a question that I have is, do we have any particular work for the next session? That's in here. And also, are we already collaborating with other groups in terms of the other national groups that are already in place that, you know, that were part of our old coalition? Have they already come in mass, or are they coming in as individuals?
If we're talking about voteequality.us, we are still working through kind of an internal branding messaging section, and we haven't yet brought in all the other groups. But that will definitely be a step. I will say we're a little bit behind. We had some delays with all the kids out of school and people being exhausted from session and coronavirus, et cetera. So we have been working with a really fantastic team that does our branding and messaging, and we've been going through kind of a process to make sure that we are presenting it simply. We are kind of astonished at the number of people that don't realize that gender equality is not explicit in the Constitution, as well as we're finding even people who know that, they don't realize that we're the only major country in the world that doesn't have that. And so there is a lot of education and outreach still to be done as a part of, you know, get out the vote, vote for equality, et cetera. So it's going to be it'll be a big effort, but we wanted to get all the little I's dotted and T's crossed before we started running around talking to all the other groups.
So basically, we have to do the same thing nationally that we did in Virginia. Spend a lot of time just educating. Educate, advocate, agitate, motivate, vote. Andrea, do you want to speak to the same thing?
Well, I was going to say one other thing is, you know, it's great to have the same groups that have been working on this to keep working on this, but we really have to have everybody seeing themselves at this table. We need more men to realize that this impacts them. We need people in any political party to realize that they should be on the right side of history. As well as we need people who, you know, quite frankly, this has usually been seen as kind of a liberal white lady thing. And, you know, we continue to work on knocking down that stereotype as well. And so we are going to go in a lot of directions that may not be the traditional directions. Voteequality.us is going to, you know, think of us as just pushing really hard to make sure that that table is open, available for everybody, and that everybody sees themselves there.
Yes, and all means all. We have men already joined as members of the National Women's Political Caucus, and who will be helping us with voteequality.us. We want young people. We want Black, Brown, Native. We want everyone. You know, we can't run an all campaign if we don't have all. So I am putting it out here now. All are invited, and we want all at the table. Andrea, do you want to speak to the National Women's Political Caucus? Same answer?
Well, I was basically going to say that I agree with Katie. We are going to want new partners. And again, with National Women's Political Caucus of Virginia, we want to have that new leadership come in that's broad and very diverse in terms of place, age, all the other things that I mentioned, and then see what kind of amazing coalition they can form with groups that look like themselves. Many of the groups that were listed, those are the older, more traditional groups. Many of them have been around for quite a while, or even if the group is newer, the people that are leading them have been around for a while. We want to see new leadership come in. We want to see new people tackle this issue and move it forward and begin to build their own power so that as they seek political office, they can look back on a record of saying, I worked to get this for the women and families of Virginia. And notice I always talk about the women and families.
Okay, I'd like to pivot back to one earlier question. Somebody wants to know about the rescission situation. Michelle, do you want to speak to why rescission is really not something that how that plays in or doesn't play into what we're doing?
Sure. So I think there's kind of a bigger picture process of how to amend the Constitution, and then just a question of historical precedent, because there's no case law on point for rescissions at all. And in terms of our brief as a whole, it's very different than most of the ones I write. There are very, very few cases on point, very few cases addressing how Article 5 works. And so this case that we're working on is precedential, one, because of the importance of it being about the ERA, but also as a legal nerd, it's pretty cool because we don't have much about from the Supreme Court about how Article 5 is supposed to work. In terms of rescission, so looking at the language of Article 5 and then looking at the way that the Constitution was amended as a whole, the theory was, for lack of a better term, kind of no backsies, right? Once a state agreed to become part of the United States and ratified the Constitution, there were no backsies then, and it's the same with amendments. And we know that that's true because if we look at history, there were previously efforts to rescind ratifications, specifically with regard to the 14th Amendment, and those purported rescissions were not recognized. And so if we look at the court of history on this, rescissions just have never been recognized, and they should not be recognized here either.
Okay, one last question. Deborah Joyce wants to know, where can I get updates about the Equal Rights Amendment in terms as when we move forward? Well, you can go on voteequality.us. You can go on the National Women. We're still uploading all of these things. We will get on a mailing list, and we will keep you involved. Joining these two respective groups will put you in our loop. Ladies, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I would probably also add, since voteequality.us is still in a little bit of a messaging branding phase, some of the best national updates that I've been seeing are coming from the ERA Coalition and from generationratify.org, and you can get on both of those lists off their websites. There frequently is a lot of overlap between all the different groups that are working on it, but everybody has kind of their own flavor, and so if you're really into it, get onto all the lists. And just kind of pick your flavor, because there are a lot of different ways to get involved in this effort.
And we need all hands on deck. Andrea, do you want to have a final word before I turn it back over to our Network Nova host committee?
I am putting the mission statement of the National Women's Political Caucus in the chat. I just did that. So again, a thank you to everyone. Join our group. Be part of the new history of Virginia. There are so many opportunities. So again, this is an organization where you aren't going to need to wait for years to put in your name and your interest for leadership. We are looking for leaders now.
Andrea, housekeeping question. How do they join?
You can go to our website, National Women's Political Caucus. I'll put it in the chat, nwpc-va.org. You can go there.
Thank you. All right, back to our hosts.
What? Oh my gosh, that was so exciting. And I am going to have a special shout out to Laura Callow. Eileen, how old did you say Laura is?
94.
94.
She's the closest thing
No,
to living
92.
I thought it was 92, and I said 92. Laura, I want to ask you, do you have any last inspiring words for the hundreds and more people in this chat? I mean, you've seen it all. Tell us, just give us the 30 seconds, the last kind of thoughts.
Well, we are on the right side of history, and I use Susan B. Anthony's mantra, failure is impossible.
I love that. Failure is impossible.
And I also, just as a point of personal privilege, I will tell you, the day that the Equal Rights Amendment passed in the General Assembly, everybody knows Eileen Davis is a tough old bird. It really didn't hit me emotionally until I got on the phone to call Laura. And I get choked up just thinking about it, to tell her that it passed, because I had promised her we were going to deliver her Virginia. And it was just one of the most touching moments of my life to call this woman and tell her that she had lived to see it happen. Because she was really like, she's like, I'm in my 90s. I'm just glad I want to see this happen. And I promised her it was, and Eileen Davis does not like to break a promise. So it is one of the moments of my life that I was able to make that call.
Well, Eileen, I mean, you appreciate this more than anybody, and everybody in this room actually too, is that 9 decades. I mean, we're still fighting, and it's incredible to feel that. So this is powerful. I'm going to hand it over to Stair, who's going to tell us about what we have to look forward to tomorrow. And then Stair, take it away.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to make a little bit longer pitch than I usually do tonight. First, I want to tell you about what's happening tomorrow, and I also want to give some extra pitches for the Badass Boutique, and then I want to kick it back to Catherine, who can talk to us about our crescendo, the finale rally. So that's just, I wanted to get a little bit of talk about that in today. So, tomorrow is Media and Disinformation, 7 p.m. in 2020. The greatest threat to our democracy is the propagation of disinformation in social media and the news. So let's get together with the powerhouse of people who know what's going on here. Lily Strider from New Blue Interactive, Lori Coleman from Demcast, and Mindy Burrell of the Women's National Democratic Club, all experts in countering mistruth and incorporating grassroots messaging. So that was something that came up today in our leadership with Sam. So I'm interested in that. And also there was some misinformation, racial misinformation that was recently put out in a webinar also. And I thought that that was with the National Women's Political Caucus. It was they just came out with something. I missed it. It was yesterday. Okay, so please don't forget to take a look at the Badass Boutique. Along with the t-shirt, you might like getting the VA Ratify ERA pin. We are giving away free tote bags, free VA Ratify ERA tote bags to the first, I think it's 6 or 8 people who order tonight. And we have a Winning is the Only Option cap campaign going on. I'm wearing a purple one now to go with my purple shirt, all right? But it's the hat campaign, and I'm gonna put that link in the chat. Otherwise, it's networknova.org/shop. Thank you, and Catherine, I thought
Who doesn't like to shop for swag? So you know us, I mean, I have, I wanna say special also to Robin Zeff Warner, who sewed every single one of these for the delegates and senators this section, and to wear them. And if you're lucky enough to own one, and we were going to have, actually when we were going to do the live one, we were going to have a sash for everybody this year. Damn it. Well, we're here virtually and we're still kicking it. So good for us. So yes, tomorrow tune in. We'll be on day 9 tomorrow for the disinformation, which is really serious. It's like, this is really one of the biggest issues going into voter suppression. What I've learned this week, one takeaway is it's all about being able to vote. And then we can rally people around racial justice, equality, different issues. Tuesday, we have 2 great programs that you need to put on your calendar. The 5 o'clock Black Women Lead. We're going to have a great panel with young women interviewing the senators, like Jennifer, I think we have Jennifer McCullen in that one, Jennifer Foy, and Mamie Locke being interviewed, and what a great panel. And then 7 o'clock is the finale rally behind me. We have Senator Warner coming, all the congressionals, all the winners from CD1, CD5, CD6, and then we have Elaine Luria, Abigail Spanberger, Jennifer Wexton. We are gonna kick the shit out of Tuesday night. So you need to be in the house, because this is all about winning is the only option. All right, so with that, be in the room, or the room where it happens. We love that you are here tonight. Thank you, everybody fighting for equality. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Andrea, Katie, and Cheryl, and Laura Callow. We're going to do this for you. So thank you for being in the fight, sister. And thank you, Mark Herring.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for being here tonight. All right. So good night, and we'll see you tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye.
I love you guys.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.